The smell was the first thing she couldn't explain. Not strong, not obvious. Something low and persistent threading through the air-conditioned corridors of a mansion that was supposed to be her new life. She told herself it was the kitchen. She told herself it was the drains. She told herself a lot of things in those first weeks, because when you are newly married and surrounded by marble floors and staff who speak only when spoken to, the last thing you want to believe is that something is wrong. Her name was Lila. She was 26 years old, and on the morning of March 4th, 3 weeks after her husband left for what he called a business trip to Riyadh, she followed the smell down a hallway she had been told very clearly never to enter. The door at the end was cracked open. She pushed it. The room beyond was cold, unnaturally, mechanically cold, and at its center sat a chest freezer the size of a car, industrial, steel, the kind of freezer that does not belong in a home. She stood there for a long moment. The smell was stronger here. Her hand reached for the lid. She lifted it, and what was inside was not food. To understand how Lila ended up standing in that room, you have to go back 11 months to the wedding. Everyone in certain circles of Dubai society knew about the wedding. $2 million spent over 3 days. A ballroom in one of the most exclusive hotels on the Strip transformed into what witnesses described as a fever dream of white orchids and candlelight. The guest list read like a who's who of Gulf business and old money. The food alone, flown in from 4 different countries, cost more than most people earn in a decade. And at the center of it all, Sheikh Rashid Al-Karimi. 44 years old, tall, composed, with the particular kind of calm that comes from a man who has never been told no. He was introduced to every room he entered with the quiet authority of someone who controlled things, deals, people, outcomes. He owned properties across 3 continents. His name appeared on charitable foundations. He dressed impeccably, spoke softly, and knew exactly when to smile. If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight. Lila had met him 6 months before the wedding at a gallery opening in DIFC. She was there with a friend. He approached her directly, with none of the usual circling. He told her what he thought of a painting she was standing in front of. He was right about it. She was impressed. 3 weeks later, he sent flowers to her apartment, an apartment he had somehow learned the address of without being given it. She told her friends it was romantic. They moved fast. He wanted it that way. Engagement within 2 months. A wedding date set before she had properly met anyone from his life. When she asked about family, he said his parents had passed and he was estranged from most relatives. A private man, he explained, who kept his world close. When she asked about his past, he answered with the next question, redirecting conversation with a skill so smooth she rarely noticed it had happened. There were red flags. Looking back, there always are. But the wedding was real. The ring was real. The flowers every morning of their courtship had been real. And so she married him. The mansion sat in one of Dubai's most secured residential compounds, gated, guarded, with cameras at every corner. She had visited twice before the wedding, always with Rashid present, always on a curated tour of the parts he wanted her to see, the kitchen, the garden, the master suite with its view of the water. Moving in was different. The staff, 3 of them, all long employed by Rashid, were polite in the way that people are when they have been instructed to be polite. They smiled, they answered questions, but they did not speak freely, and Lila noticed early that when she entered a room, conversations stopped. Not abruptly, just carefully. There were 3 areas of the house she was told were off limits: a utility corridor on the ground floor, a room off the garage, at a basement level that Rashid referred to simply as storage, locked by a code she was never given. She didn't push it. The house was enormous. He was a private man. She was still learning the rhythms of a life that felt, in almost every material sense, extraordinary. But then Rashid began traveling more than she expected. Days away, sometimes a week. She was left in the house with staff who watched her, in a neighborhood where she knew no one, with a phone that she slowly realized received very few calls, because almost no one had been given the number. She had been, without quite understanding when it happened, isolated. The smell began in the third week. She noticed it first near the kitchen, dismissed it, mentioned it to a member of staff who said she would look into it. Nothing changed. A week later, it had moved, or she had traced it, to the ground floor corridor, the one she'd been told not to enter. She asked Rashid about it over video call. He paused. Then he said it was probably a drain issue, that he'd have someone look at it when he returned. His tone was easy, explanatory. He changed the subject within 30 seconds. She let it go, but the smell didn't leave. It deepened. On the morning she found the body, Layla had not slept properly in 4 days. The smell had become impossible to dismiss. It lived in the corridor like something that had decided to stay. By now, she was certain it wasn't drains. She had Googled it at 3 in the morning, that specific kind of smell, and the results she got back sat in her stomach like a stone. The staff had the day off. Rashid was still away. She walked to the corridor at 11 in the morning, in daylight, because she had spent the night convincing herself that whatever she found would have an explanation. Faulty pipes, dead rodents, something mechanical and embarrassing and fixable. The door at the end of the hallway was not fully closed. She didn't know if it had been left that way or if it had drifted open in the night. She pushed it and walked through. The room was cool before she reached the freezer. Then it was cold. Then it was the cold of a place that had been maintained at a specific, deliberate temperature for a very long time. The freezer was chest height, roughly 2 meters long, steel, padlocked, but the padlock was hanging open. She stood in front of it for what she later described as several minutes. She was aware on some level that she was at a threshold, that whatever she found would divide her life into before and after. She lifted the lid. The body inside was a woman, young, mid-20s, perhaps younger, preserved by cold, positioned with a stillness that only comes from a person who has been arranged, not a person who simply fell. Lila did not scream. She said later that what happened was quieter than that, a kind of internal collapse. She lowered the lid, she sat down on the floor of that room, and then, slowly, she began to think. She recognized the face. Not immediately, not with certainty, but as she sat on the floor of that cold room, something in the back of her memory was turning over, searching. 2 months after she moved in, she had been unpacking books in the study when she found a photograph slipped between 2 volumes on a shelf. A candid shot. A woman in the garden of this house, smiling at whoever was holding the camera. Young, dark-haired, comfortable in the way people are comfortable in spaces they feel are their own. She had asked Rashid about it. He had taken the photo from her hand without looking at it and said it was a former employee who no longer worked for him. His tone had been final in that specific way he had, the tone that meant the subject was closed. She had accepted that. She had put it in the category of things she didn't yet understand about a man she was still learning. Sitting on the floor of the cold room, she understood now. She stood up. She left the room, and she began, quietly and carefully, to search the house.
She started with the study. Behind a panel in the built-in bookshelf, not well hidden, just hidden enough, she found a box. Inside, 3 passports. 2 in Rashid's photograph, but different names. One that appeared to be a different person entirely, but with a biographical document attached that cross-referenced an address she recognized as one Rashid had mentioned offhandedly months ago. Financial records, printed and rubber-banded. A series of printed news articles. Missing persons reports, she realized. Printed from different Arabic and English news sources. The dates on them spanned 7 years. There were photographs of women. Multiple women. Some she didn't recognize. One she did. Her own photo. Taken, it appeared, before he had ever approached her at the gallery, before they had met. He had researched her before he introduced himself.
She had not been a chance encounter. She had been selected. She put everything back. Her hands were steady in the way that hands are steady when a person has moved past fear into something colder and more focused. She went to her bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed and she thought, with the particular clarity of someone who knows they are in danger and has only a narrow margin to work with, about what to do next. She did not call the police immediately. She knew enough about where she was, the compound, the security, Rashid's web of staff and contacts, to understand that a panicked call could be intercepted, dismissed, or complicated in ways that would give him time to respond. She needed something that would survive without her. She used a tablet she had kept in her suitcase, not connected to the house's network, and composed a detailed message. She described the body, the room, the freezer. She photographed the documents from the study on her personal phone, then airdropped them to the tablet, then sent everything to her sister in London, to a lawyer whose card she'd kept for years without ever needing, and to a general emergency crimes inbox for Interpol that she found after 20 minutes of searching. Then she started a voice recording on her phone and left it running. 2 hours later, Rashid called. His voice was warm. He said the trip had gone well. He said he was wrapping up and would be home the following evening. He asked how she was doing. She told him she was fine. She told him she had mostly stayed in that day, that the house felt quiet. He paused, just a beat, the kind of pause she might not have noticed 3 weeks ago. Then he said, good, he would see her tomorrow. He arrived that night. He came through the main door at 11:45. She heard the code being entered, the locks releasing. She was in the sitting room with the lights on, her hands in her lap, the voice recording still running in her pocket. He came in composed, jacket still on, the ease of a man who moves through spaces like he owns them, because he does. He sat across from her. He did not ask about her day. He did not ask about the house. He looked at her for a long moment with an expression that was not quite a smile and not quite something else, and then he said, I think you've been busy. She said nothing. He said he didn't blame her for being curious. He said the woman in the freezer had given him no choice, that she had been a person who made promises and then broke them, who had threatened things she didn't understand, who had left him with a problem he needed to solve. He said this in the voice of a man explaining a minor inconvenience. He hoped Lila understood that she was different, that she had the opportunity to be smarter than that. He said all of this like a man who believed he was still in control of the room. He was not. At 12:07 in the morning, the compound gate opened. Not from the inside. 4 vehicles from Dubai Police's Criminal Investigation Department came through simultaneously, followed by 2 Interpol liaison officers who had been coordinating with local authorities for the past 6 hours, since Lila's email had arrived, been read, been verified against a cold case file that had been sitting open for 3 years, and been escalated with a speed that very few cases are escalated. Rashid heard the vehicles. He stood. He looked at Lila. She looked back at him. She said, I made one move before you got home. The officers entered through the front, the side, and the utility entrance simultaneously. Rashid did not run. He was, until the moment the handcuffs closed, still performing composure. Still the Sheikh. Still the man in control. The freezer was opened by investigators at 1:15 in the morning. The body was removed. A forensic sweep of the property over the following 72 hours uncovered evidence connected to 4 additional missing women. 3 from the Gulf region, 1 from Eastern Europe, whose cases spanned nearly a decade. Rashid's real name, established through fingerprint records, belonged to a man who had 3 prior identities, 2 previous marriages, and an Interpol red notice issued under a name no one in Dubai had ever heard him use. The Sheikh had never been a sheikh at all. He had built everything from nothing. The name, the status, the invitations, the charitable associations, the carefully maintained image of power and respectability. He had understood, with a predator's precision, that wealth is a kind of permission, that people stop asking questions when the furniture is expensive enough, that a man who seems to own everything also seems to have nothing to hide. He had counted on that. He had lived inside it for years. What he had not counted on was a woman who, standing in front of an industrial freezer in a locked room she was told never to enter, decided to think instead of panic. Lila testified at trial 18 months later.
Rashid was convicted on multiple charges across 2 jurisdictions. The families of the victims, women who had been missing, grieved, and given up on, finally had answers. The mansion was seized, the gate closed for the last time. And somewhere in the quiet aftermath of all of it, what endured was not the wealth, not the wedding, not the illusion of a life that had been constructed so carefully for so long. What endured was a woman sitting on the edge of a bed, alone in a house full of secrets, choosing to be smarter than her situation. Sometimes survival is not loud. Sometimes it is a tablet in a suitcase, a recording running in a pocket, an email sent before the door opens. Sometimes the coldest room in the house is not the one with the freezer. It's the room where a predator sits and believes he's already won.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.